I think the purpose of a real negotiation has to be what is acceptable to us? Where do I want to go? What do I want to accomplish in this interaction? And if I can keep that mindset right at the front of everything I'm trying to do, then we can have the tough conversations. Then you can vent a little bit. Then you can be emotional. And if my whole focus is, what am I trying to accomplish here? What's my goal? Then I can get through that very easily because I don't need to convince you that I'm right. I don't need you to believe what I believe. What is my goal here?
From humble beginnings, Insurance Claim HQ has grown to one of the largest property casualty firms in the country. We didn't do it alone, and you shouldn't either. Every week, we're talking to claims professionals and top experts from all over, all to help you grow your business and make you stronger. Let's level up together. I'm Galen Hare. Welcome to the Level Up Claims Podcast. The hardest part of this business isn't policy language or even claim strategy. It's people. Whether it's angry clients, stubborn adjusters, or frustrated team members, the conversations you have will make or break your success. Former SWAT hostage negotiator Scott Tillema joins us to reveal how the same principles used in life or death situations can transform your business communication. It can defuse tension, and it can build unshakable trust. Let's welcome Scott Tillema. Scott, thanks so much for joining us.
Galen, how are you? Nice to see you.
Yeah, pretty good. Good to see you again, man. We had you at the summit. It was amazing. Everyone was raving about you afterwards. So I'm really pumped that you're setting aside some time for us so we can get a little deeper on a couple of things.
Hey, I had a great time. The summit was awesome. So it is my pleasure to spend a little bit more time with you and your audience.
Awesome. All right, I got to know, how did you become a hostage negotiator? Like, what is that path like?
Yeah, and surprisingly, they don't just let people sign up to do this kind of work. So
I know, I tried.
My education, yeah, right. My education formally is a behavioral science undergraduate degree with a graduate degree in psychology. So I think having the benefit of understanding how people think and more importantly, how we can move them in a certain direction is pretty important. But also very practically, we're running into people who are struggling with mental illness, substance abuse. So having a background and knowledge of some of that is really helpful as well. To be a hostage negotiator, almost exclusively, you have to be sworn law enforcement. So I worked as a police officer in the Chicago suburbs for over 20 years. So with my background in psychology and behavioral science and my work in law enforcement, I was selected in 2007 to be part of this regional SWAT team that served over 70 cities in the Chicago area. And that was a pretty cool phone call to get.
That's awesome. You made this interesting comment just now. You're dealing with a lot of people with mental issues and, substance abuse. And I think that brings me to a really good point. One of the things you talk about, which is you can't really influence other people if you don't have your own triggers under control. And can you explain a little more about that?
Yeah, for sure. When I teach negotiation, particularly to law enforcement, one of the first things we talk about is the concept of manage yourself first. That we are being thrown into crisis situations almost exclusively. And this is not normal. I mean, most regular people aren't engaging with people who are in crisis. So when we're coming into a situation where there is a threat of violence, where there is a weapon involved, where someone is being held, it's a scary situation. I think any normal person would react with a bit of panic. So we teach that we have to manage ourselves, and how we do that, we accomplish this by going through this stress inoculation. You go through practice over and over where we find different ways to increase the pressure, because you find out very quickly how you function in a classroom or how you function at home is very different when the pressure's on, and you know that there is such consequence that's going to come from the outcome of this conversation. So we get into thoughts of, breathing exercises to move from a very primitive fight or flight into a much more thoughtful thinking process. We have to understand what can be done or said that's going to throw us off a little bit and trigger a negative reaction in us. And just being able to understand yourself first goes a long way to managing your reactions when you are confronted with a situation that might trigger a unusual reaction in 99% of the population.
No, and that makes sense. And I think kind of staying along those lines, I mean, one of the things I think I read, I don't think you said it at the summit necessarily, but I definitely read that you had said it, was how your emotional tone, it sets the outcome of a negotiation. And I think that's so important because one of the failures I see, at least as a lawyer, I get to do a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking because I get this file where like a roofer or a public adjuster or someone has been involved in this claim forever and it's gone completely sideways. And I now get to read these emails, listen to these recordings of calls, and like at some point it just evolves into a yelling, screaming match between the adjuster and the roofer, which I think we can all agree does not benefit anyone, right? But one of the things that it strikes me is like their emotional tone is off because they're taking this I'm fighting with you instead of I'm negotiating. So what kind of things can you do to kind of get your emotional tone properly keyed in for the situation you're in?
So first of all, the understanding that we are emotional people. This is normal and it's okay. And the concept of I can't experience emotions actually builds more negative emotions inside of me. So just allowing people to express themselves and sometimes having the idea that it's really not about me right now. They're having a reaction and it might be directed toward me, but it's really not because of anything I've done. They're experiencing this stress, this emotion, and that's okay. Allow them to release that in a bit of a controlled manner and allow that to be acceptable. Where it becomes a problem is where my ego gets involved and I start having a thought of you can't yell at me, you can't say this, or we play the right or wrong game, or I'm trying to get you to believe what I believe. I think the purpose of a real negotiation has to be what is acceptable to us? Where do I want to go? What do I want to accomplish in this interaction? And if I can keep that mindset right at the front of everything I'm trying to do, then we can have the tough conversations. Then you can vent a little bit. Then you can be emotional. And if my whole focus is, what am I trying to accomplish here? What's my goal? Then I can get through that very easily because I don't need to convince you that I'm right. I don't need you to believe what I believe. What is my goal here? And I think in any interaction, whether it be in a negotiation or whether it be in an everyday conversation, if we're clear in what we want to accomplish, then we can be much more focused than the people who are just getting taken sideways because they feel this, they have a thought about this, they want to comment this on social media. If everything is guided by what is my goal here, then we're going to be much more focused and have a much better reaction or response when we're met with someone who might be a little bit more challenging.
I can't tell you how good it is to hear you say that. I feel like sometimes we forget what the real goal is. I think sometimes we get into a negotiation and our goal becomes to win. But like, that's not really the goal. Like in everything we do professionally, there's dollar signs behind what we do, right? So like my goal is to get that claim closed for a number that allows all the work to be done so my client can be made whole, and ideally at a number that contractor can make a profit, right? The contractor is negotiating to make the best profit they can, but like it doesn't make their life any better that an adjuster said you're right. You know, that they don't leave with that. But if they go in with the goal of hearing you're right, well, A, it's never going to freaking happen, and B, you're fighting for the wrong thing, right?
Right. Let's get to a point where I can look at the situation and say, yeah, this is good. This is acceptable. Could we push on and maybe get another percent or two? Maybe. But my goal isn't to take everything off the table and have you come out feeling like a loser. Like, I don't think there's ever been a negotiation that I've won. I don't want anyone walking away feeling that I have beat them or I have unfairly gotten something over on them, because maybe in the minute you have won, or you have accomplished something, or you have come out ahead of where you think you could have. But I want the other side to walk away feeling that they have been treated fairly and feeling like they've accomplished something here, and have whatever they walk away with be acceptable to them. Because we might have power in a situation. We might be able to force somebody into an agreement, but ultimately when they figure out, hey, I've been cheated, I've been lied to, I've been taken advantage of, they might come back and find a way to torpedo that agreement. And that could cause real problems for you later. So I think that it's important to be, pretty decent, pretty fair in these situations and have them walk away feeling like this is okay.
And you're exactly right. I mean, just signed a new case yesterday. You can't make this up. Massive, massive claim. And it was one of those, they reached an agreement. The agreement was not ideal, but it was obviously acceptable enough for this client that was going to hire us to do the deal instead of hire us, right? So he did the deal, and then they just kept taking more. They said, no, we're not going to do that deal. We want to pay you even less. Literally sent the paperwork to him. He signed it, sent it back, and every time they did that for 6 rounds, they kept lowering the number, asking for more concessions from him, until finally he had lost that negotiation so bad that he torpedoed the deal and hired us, and it's wild because that is I think that's like a $6 or $8 million residential claim, like all day, easily. And he had settled it at the very end, the last volley where he was going to honor the deal. He'd settled it for $280,000. But they wanted to get it lowered to $250 at that point. They had started at about $1.5 million, the first offer. They had just worked him down over $1 million, continuing to take advantage of him because they wanted to win, even though they were already winning, to the point where he said no and he torpedoed the deal. So you're exactly right.
Yeah, and people will fight back when they feel they have been treated unfairly. People time and time again will make decisions against their best self-interest because they are so upset about what happened. Going back to the concept of we're emotional people. We think logic and reason rule the day, and there's plenty of situations where we're going to rely on that, but emotions are going to creep out. So get to a place where, hey, we've got an acceptable deal. We're in an acceptable window of time to get this done. And let's let the other person walk away feeling good about that. And I think that only serves to benefit you and your reputation and your referrals and all the thing that's going to give you value in the future by having people walk away happy with the service you provided them. That's going to be an exponential win for you. And yes, could you get another 2% in that deal and another 3% in that deal? Sure. And we can teach you ways to do that. But what's your big goal here?
I always think that the deal that you're willing to tank everything over to get an extra percent, that's got a very, very large number of zeros behind it. And I'm just not sure that I've seen it yet, right? There's that one where maybe an extra 2 points gets me to, some island for the rest of my life. But until I see it, I'd much rather preserve all my relationships forever.
How about it? Yeah, relationships are very important. And I always have this mindset that if we want influence begins with a connection. And if we want connection begins with a dialogue. That we're not really influenced by strangers or people we don't know. So let's start to build that dialogue, that connection, and that rapport and trust to get us to a point where we can be a little bit more influential and people want to work with you.
Absolutely. Let's talk about listening. So I thought for a long time that I listened well. And then a couple of years ago, I learned that the way most of us listen is we are quiet while someone is talking, while we think about what we want to say next. And apparently that doesn't qualify as listening, which was mind-blowing because that's
crazy.
But, and I'm sure anyone listening is laughing, but I challenge any of you to think, just catch yourself during the next conversation. You will find yourself being quiet while the other person talks while you think about what you're going to say next, especially in a high pressure situation, like even in personal life, like a date, right? I need to be entertaining to this woman. So I need to think about what I'm going to say to her next. A business meeting, I need to convince this guy that I'm the real deal. So while he's telling this story, I need to come up with a story that's similar enough that I'm not trying to one up him, but it shows him I know what he's talking about, right? But that's not the type of listening you push at all. In fact, you have very specific thoughts on what type of listening is necessary for negotiation.
For sure. And going to the 7 habits of highly effective people, Covey teaches seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I have a variation of that. Seek first to understand. The end. Not there is no and then to be understood. And there's a couple reasons for that, because if we're going to seek first to understand and then to be understood, then my turn is coming. I'm waiting to speak, just what you described. Just work to understand. That's it. First of all, and I learned this in speaking school, nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about you. And that's deflating to egos around the world when I tell people nobody cares about you. Who do they want to talk about? Themselves. So if we can work to understand them and allow them to talk and have the different techniques of reflecting or mirroring, where I can hand the conversation back to you, asking good open-ended questions, have some emotion labels so we're getting past the content of what they're saying and getting to the feeling behind it, now we're starting to have a much deeper connection. And we teach the 8 skills of active listening and crisis and hostage negotiation. And anyone who's ever read a book on hostage or crisis negotiation is going to be familiar with these techniques. But the idea is your power in negotiation comes from information and options. And everybody thinks that the best negotiators are just these smooth talkers that can show up to the table and say these sneaky phrases, and people are just going to hypnotically say yes to them. You find out in a hurry that, all right, when that doesn't work, you better have something else available. And your real power is information options. How are we going to get that if we're not being good listeners? And in a true SWAT negotiation, yes, as a primary negotiator, I'm intently listening to try to gather information, but I've also got a team behind me doing some research. They're digging on social media, they're having interviews, they're getting me more information so I can be more powerful in my conversations. Even if it's something as simple as the guys were just on the Twitter, on the Instagram account, and they're saying, do not ask about Sprinkles the cat. All right, that's a no-go. Finding these ways that we can connect and avoiding these areas that could be these little minefields is giving me little advantages as I go. And everybody thinks we communicate all the time, so we're good at it. I'm a good listener because I listen to people all day, every day. But it's very humbling to go through a negotiation class and go through days of active listening and realize I'm not so good at this.
I agree with everything you said. I'm trying to think about what order I want to ask these next 2 questions in. So the first thing I'll say is this. There's an entire school of thought in trial skills. Very, very famous trial lawyer. He's still alive today. I won't call him out. He calls all jurors Bubba, because Bubba's like a common guy, right? And the first thing he teaches you, if you go to the school with him, is Bubba doesn't give a shit about your client. Bubba might care about his family, but Bubba really only cares about himself. And so I love that about not really seeking to be understood as much as just seeking to understand. Because at the end of the day, the person you're trying to get to give you something or make a concession, they care about themselves. So there's got to be some balance there. But I guess what that brings me to is this. I have my own ideas, but in your experience, how do you figure out what's truly being said? Because I think one of the things you and I both know in our respective professions is people will tell us something or they'll ask for something, but they usually want something else, or they usually mean something deeper. But we just get that surface. And I feel like sometimes that leads to a very unsuccessful result or a very unsuccessful negotiation, because we're answering the question that is literally being asked, but not in reality is being asked.
Yeah. And what I found to be fascinating, and tell me if you've had this experience as well, sometimes people don't know what they really want. They're experiencing this emotion. They're in a crisis state. They're in a heightened state of being loud or having all this energy. But as we start to have this discussion, it's not clear to them what they want. So yes, in many cases, people are going to hold back. And a good question might be, what isn't being said here? To kind of allow them to feel like, I know there's something more, and give them the opportunity to share that. But asking good questions and engaging in this dialogue is really going to be an exploration. You're almost going to be a coach or a therapist to somebody to help them understand, what is it you truly want here? Because we're hung up on this one issue or this one point, and I'm not sure why, but if we can continue to have this dialogue, it might be revealed. You know what? It's not that I want control of this situation. It's not that I just want peace of mind. I just want to save face. I just don't want to be embarrassed when we get out of here. and we're starting to reveal what their interest is behind the position that they put forward. It's easy to hear that position, but what's the interest behind it? And continuing to build that trust, that rapport, that connection is going to allow them to be comfortable enough to explore that with you and maybe reveal, this is what I truly want. And now we can have an entirely different conversation to help you achieve what you truly need.
I think there's so much to that. And I guess the first step, it sounds like, tell me if I'm wrong, Scott, is like just acknowledging that people are sometimes not saying something that they really mean. Maybe they don't know. It's possible they don't know, especially, I guess, in a lot of the situations you had to deal with in hostage negotiation. Like, these people are amped, right? For whatever reason, whether it's substance fueled, whether it's a mental illness, or whether they truly are just so angry and upset about something, they're amped up. And I know personally, when I'm really, really mad, like so mad I can scream or am screaming, I'm not necessarily in touch with why I'm actually mad, right? I'm not actually mad. I won't even say anything that has set me off because I will sound crazy, but I'm not actually mad about that thing I'm yelling about, right? I'm mad about maybe the 17 other things that happened to me today and the fact that I just don't feel like I have my feet on the ground. But are there any kind of questions that you tend to ask? I know at some point this just becomes gut, right? You've done it so often, you know. But are there any questions that you tend to ask that you think help open people up and get them to get in touch with what they really are upset about or what they really want to say?
I think instead of maybe focusing on the questions, is focus on the timing of those questions. Because so often we come in and we're problem solvers. There's a lot of type A personalities in the legal field, I'm sure, and so many different fields, that we want to come in and solve the problem and get right to the solutions. But timing is your strategy piece here. And maybe just allowing them to go through that and allowing them to come down and acknowledging that emotion with an emotion label. Hey, you sound really frustrated. You sound, whatever emotion it might be. You seem embarrassed. You seem, I sense you are, and then you pick your emotion. I think that's a pretty good emotion label. And then sit in silence a little bit and allow them to share, yeah, that's it. Or maybe it's not quite it. And we're going to get to that right emotion. And that's tough to do. We don't want to do that too early on. But if we start talking about how we feel, and then we start to unpack that a little bit, what got us to this point? And for me, I want to explore what happened in the last 24 to 48 hours that why are we at this point right now? Like, what has occurred to bring us here now? Because we might hear the long story of, well, the last 10 years I had to deal with her or this or the job or whatever it might be. But what's going on right now? And when we start to reveal that, what that triggering situation might be, we're just going to slowly unpack that. And it's the same reason that a psychologist has a couch in their office. They want you to be comfortable. And when we rush these questions, nobody likes to be peppered with questions. Nobody likes to be interrogated. So maybe we just slow that down a little bit and share a little bit about ourselves. Hey, I've been here too. Just to allow them to say, I'm not alone. And what you're feeling is normal and natural and reasonable. So they don't feel isolated here. Get them in a more comfortable spot. And this is going to start to be revealed. And there's nothing we can do to magically make people trust us. But instead of thinking about the right question, let's get the timing right and just allow them to grow comfortable with you. And I think that might even be a stronger strategy to move somebody from a really tough place of crisis to a much more conversational spot. And then from there, maybe a little bit further down the road, we can get into discussion around problem solving.
That makes sense. And you're so right? We come in, we want to fix the problem or we want to get to the result. So one of the ways we try to prove we're listening is by asking a lot of questions about what they're saying. But now you're being interrogated, which is not like comfortable, you know? And I think it's so interesting that we do that because I personally get pissed when someone calls me up and is asking me a million questions, you know?
That's it.
I'm like, just cut to the chase. Tell me what you want. I'm not doing this, right?
But that's the piece that they don't teach you in some of these classes. And you can tell the people who have gotten this training, or maybe this is just how they are, that they feel the need to continue the conversation. So every time it's another question. Like I know right now in my mind, a couple friends, colleagues that I know, they're just the question people. And I was a detective for 5.5 years. I know people don't love being asked questions.
Yeah, you certainly can interrogate people, I'm sure, but it's just not the best way to get to what you want. And here's the thing. So we've been talking about hostage negotiation, obviously, but very few people that are listening to this are ever going to be hostage negotiators, I hope.
I hope.
Unless they get accidentally conscripted into something. But nevertheless, this applies to so much more than that. It applies to family, but also reasons people would be listening now would be business. Can you give us a couple of examples of how some of the techniques we talked about, because we only have about 5 minutes left, so we're not going to be able to cover the other 18 topics we could talk about with you just on this one thing. But can you give us a couple of examples about how, clients you've coached, they've been able to apply these concepts about listening the right way, having the right emotional tone, how that's helped them in their business?
For sure. All of these concepts here that we're talking about in hostage and crisis negotiation, and you're exactly right. Hopefully no one is ever doing this. This is verbal influence. This is getting what we want. And that could be, we want more money, we want more sales, we want more power, whatever we want more of. And we see this with leaders all the time who struggle with these difficult conversations, because it's tough to sit down with somebody and say, hey, your performance is not where it needs to be. It's tough to sit down with somebody and say, you're not getting this raise, you're not getting this promotion, we have to let you go. These are tough conversations. So what happens when we have these negative emotions? We avoid it, which never solves a problem, or we rush through it as fast as we can, which leaves people feeling a little bit unseen. So if you are a leader or somebody who wants more influence, what's stopping you from studying the techniques of verbal influence, studying the techniques of hostage or crisis negotiations? Because as a leader, now you're becoming more influential. People aren't doing the things you're telling them to do because of your position on the organizational chart. They're doing the things that you want them to do because they believe in you. They feel that connection with you. They understand your vision, your message, and they want to be part of that. And how much more powerful is that than a bunch of people following you because they have to, versus I want to follow this guy. I believe in you. I have this connection, and you ask me to do something. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it well. So from a leadership standpoint, the verbal influence, the connection that you have to get to that point cannot be overstated on how important this is. And maybe it's in sales, just starting to understand what somebody's needs are, what their desires are, how we can overcome certain objections. Maybe it's in our relationships, which I think is probably the most important piece that we all have. How can we be better in our relationships as a partner, as a father, as a friend? Being able to connect with somebody deeply, to be a good listener, to understand how we deliver a message and how impactful that can be, to be strategic about how we deliver that message, whether it be in writing, on the phone, in person. All these things can come together. And as you appreciate this and learn to take it at the higher level, and people are listening now, they're already good at this. They're not listening because they're bad. How do we take this to the next level? How do you really level up? This is it. And how is it going to impact your world in ways that you can't imagine? Because people are going to want to work with you. They're going to like you. They're going to enjoy you. Your influence expands, and then you're unstoppable. You get to do all the things you've ever wanted to do because you have it figured out. And AI is never going to be able to teach you to do this. This is a decision that we make. AI can help you with this, but what makes us uniquely human is that connection, that bond that we have with one another to say, this person actually cares about me. Whew, that's huge.
And that's exactly, I couldn't agree more, Scott. And that's the thing, right? Like in a summit, we decided this summit this year was going to be very heavy AI focused because there was so, it was out last year, but it was so primitive in so many ways. And there were some tools that we knew would really help everyone. And we knew by before this time next year, we knew that AI tools would be everywhere. So we wanted to kind of give people, but you and Emma, I think, were the two real big non-AI presentations, because human connection will never be replaced by a robot. And for the people that do replace it with a robot, I feel bad for them, because that just means that they've really lost hope. Like, I'm not even being mean, I do.
And that's
think
happening. That's actually happening.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's really sad, and I feel bad for those people, because what that tells me is not that they're incapable of connection. It means they've given up on meaningful human connection because they've been burned or they haven't really been open, so they think they've been burned. There's lots of reasons, and we are starting to see that, and it's super unhealthy. But human connection makes everything. This team sitting in this building right now, above and behind me, do not exist without the human connection. Our clients don't stick around without the human connection. We become a mill that just handles low value, high volume cases all day using computers, which I could probably make more money doing, honestly. But the human connection is what makes it's our ethos, and it's in our very marrow. So this type of stuff you're talking about, you're right. No computer is ever going to take this place, ever.
That's it. And having that balance between using AI to level up ourselves, and there's so many great uses for it, with the balance of I'm still a real person and I still have to really connect to get to where I want to go. You're in a pretty strong position.
Yeah. And now you get to focus on connection instead of doing a bunch of data entry that some robot can do for you. Scott, you've been amazing. I'm glad we got to dig in deep on kind of these two subtopics, because when you talk, you cover a lot of topics relating to communication. So thanks for doing that with us. Before you go, though, I do have to ask you, and I know you kind of touched on it, but what does it mean to you to level up?
For me, that means to be my very best, to understand when I've had these conversations, these are life or death conversations. And I'm not saying that as an exaggeration. I know that's absolute fact. So if we could handle all of our engagements every day with the mindset of there's real consequence that's going to come from this interaction, that means I'm going to read the book, I'm going to listen to the podcast, I am going to learn from the experts and do everything that I can. So if something goes bad, I know it's not because I was unprepared, uneducated, not ready for this. I'm in the best position I can to achieve good outcomes in every interaction.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us, Scott.
Thank you for having me. And again, thanks for a great summit. Everyone on your team has been just amazing. I had a great time, and I hope to see you guys again.
Will do. I'd like to thank Scott Tillema for joining us on the podcast. It's so interesting. Someone that literally has engaged in life and death conversations as a career, to take those same concepts and apply those to business and even family. I tend to think about if we really just focused on communicating clearly and listening the right way, how much better our lives would be holistically, not just personally, but also in business. So next time you're in a conversation, try listening.
Follow us on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player.